The twin crimson moons hung low in the night sky, their eerie glow casting a blood-red hue over the endless expanse of the desert. Beneath their watchful gaze, the sand shimmered like a sea of rubies, and the air seemed heavy with secrets. It was said that no one who wandered the crimson expanse under the twin moons ever returned, but for Kellen, the danger was a gamble he couldn't avoid. Kellen was a smuggler by trade and a wanderer by necessity. The crimson expanse was his only chance of escape. Pursued by the ruthless syndicate after a deal gone wrong, he had two choices: face the merciless bounty hunters or brave the forbidden sands. He chose the latter, clutching the small, battered compass that had belonged to his late father. It was said to be enchanted, though Kellen had always dismissed such claims as nonsense. The first night in the expanse was uneventful, though unsettling. The silence was unnatural, broken only by the sound of Kellen's boots crunching against the sand. The air was dry, and the sky seemed vast and oppressive, dominated by the twin moons that seemed far too close for comfort. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, but when he looked over his shoulder, there was nothing but sand dunes and shadows. By the second night, Kellen's doubts began to grow. He hadn't seen any signs of life, not an insect, not a bird, not even a cactus. His canteen was running low, and the compass, which he'd hoped would guide him, spun wildly whenever he tried to set a course. He had no sense of direction, and the crimson light of the moons made the dunes look identical in every direction. Still, he pressed on, knowing that stopping meant certain death. It was on the third night that he saw her. She stood atop a distant dune, her figure silhouetted against the crimson moons. Her robes billowed in the wind, though Kellen felt no breeze. Her long hair shimmered like spun silver, and her eyes glowed faintly, as though reflecting the moons themselves. She beckoned to him without speaking, and though every instinct screamed for him to run, his feet carried him toward her. As he approached, the woman smiled, a smile that was both kind and sad. "You are lost," she said, her voice soft but resonant. "And yet you seek something." Kellen hesitated. "I'm just trying to get out of this cursed desert. The expanse does not release its travelers so easily," she said. "But perhaps I can help you if you're willing to pay the price." Kellen's hand instinctively went to the pouch at his waist, where he kept the few coins he had left. "I don't have much, but—" The woman shook her head. "Not gold. Something far more valuable." Before Kellen could ask what she meant, the sand beneath his feet began to shift. He stumbled backward as the ground opened up, revealing a massive obsidian temple buried beneath the dunes. The woman descended into the darkness without hesitation, and Kellen, against his better judgment, followed. Inside the temple, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of incense. The walls were adorned with ancient carvings, depicting figures bowing beneath the twin moons, their faces obscured. At the center of the chamber stood an altar, upon which rested a single, glowing crystal. "This is the heart of the moons," the woman explained. "It can grant you passage through the expanse and protect you from the syndicate, but it demands something in return." "What kind of somethings?" Kellen asked, wary. The woman's glowing eyes fixed on him. "Your memories. The heart will take what is most precious to you." Kellen's thoughts immediately turned to his father, the man who had taught him how to navigate the stars, who had given him the compass that now seemed useless. His father's voice, his laughter, the stories they'd shared around the fire. Could he give that up? "I don't have a choice, do I?" he said finally. The woman's smile was sad again. "Few who come here do." With a deep breath, Kellen stepped forward and placed his hands on the crystal. It was cold at first, but then a searing heat surged through his body. Images flashed before his eyes. His childhood, his father, the day they had watched the twin moons rise together. One by one, the memories faded, leaving behind only a hollow ache. When it was over, Kellen collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The woman knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You are free to leave the expanse," she said softly. "The syndicate will no longer pursue you. But remember this: the moons never forget." Kellen stumbled out of the temple and into the crimson-lit desert. To his surprise, The compass in his hand now pointed steadily to the west. He followed it, and by dawn, he had reached the edge of the expanse. The air smelled of salt, and in the distance, he saw the glimmer of the ocean. But as he stood there, staring at the horizon, he realized he couldn't remember why he had come to the expanse in the first place. He couldn't remember the face of the man who had given him the compass or the stories he used to tell. All he knew was that he had paid the price and escaped. Above him, the twin moons began to fade into the morning sky, their crimson light lingering like a distant, unspoken promise.